I'm going to call the Butte-Silver Council of Commissioners regular meeting for Wednesday, March 4th, 2020 to order, please. Can we have roll call?
We have 12 present and 0 absent.
Thank you. Commissioner McDonough, would you lead us in the prayer and the pledge?
Almighty God, we implore you, look upon us and guide us this night as we make decisions which shall greatly affect our community of Butte-Silver. Direct our thoughts, words, and deeds so that we please you and best serve our fellow citizens. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we're going to rearrange and we're going to move this, the Chief Executive's report on Superfund up above everything tonight so that everyone can hear what's going on with Superfund. And there's been some misinformation out there that we're actually going to vote on this consent decree tonight. That is not the case. We're going to have this presentation to the council from all the parties that are involved, and then it'll be up to the council to spell out the path forward, how many meetings they want to go, whether it goes into April or even further. But there's been an awful lot of meetings already, and we're still meeting with individual commissioners in their individual districts. If they want to have a meeting, please contact myself or the staff, and we will get that set up. And if you want to have a meeting on any other issues regarding the consent decree, just let us know. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to John Sesso, the Superfund coordinator, to start the presentation on the Superfund CD. John.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. For the record, John Sesso, Superfund coordinator, Butte-Silver Bow. Really pleased to have the opportunity to join the parties to the consent decree and make this presentation tonight. I think it will be informative. And here's how we got to try to go about it. There are going to be 3 statements made by the Environmental Protection Agency. The Deputy Assistant Administrator, Betsy Smittinger, will come first. And then on behalf of the state of Montana, Patrick Holmes, the Governor's Natural Resource Policy Advisor, and then Patricia Gallery from the Atlantic Richfield Company. They will make their statements. Then I intend to go through a quick presentation as quickly as I can to try to describe and explain the content of the consent decree, so you just have that grounding. We've had several meetings these last few weeks, but we have not presented this information formally to you as the governing body. And then once we have completed the presentation, then we'll kick it back to the chair, Chief Executive Palmer, and then he can coordinate questions that you may have for any of us that made presentations or any of our staffs that will make presentations as well. I want to reiterate as well that this is just the next step in the process. If this were a relay race, the baton was passed along from the negotiating parties on February 13th. The baton was passed along to Butte-Silver Bow to start an education process. We've gone through that for about 3 weeks now, and now we want to pass the baton to the governing body and allow you to go through whatever processes that you want to and take the time you feel is necessary to consider all the information that we're presenting and that has been presented, and consider the questions and the comments from our constituents before we then consider our vote to sign the consent decree and then move it along and pass the baton back to the court and the U.S. Department of Justice. So we'll get on with it. I'd like to introduce Betsy Smittinger from the U.S. EPA Region 8 office for her initial comments.
Thank you, John, and good evening to the council. I appreciate the opportunity to be in Montana this evening. This is a historic moment for your wonderful community. Today, the commissioners are beginning their consideration of a cleanup proposal that will help bring closure to nearly 4 decades of Superfund activity in Butte. The consent decree you're being asked to approve is the result of over 30 years of ongoing cleanup work which has now led to two important documents. The first is the Butte Priority Soils Operable Unit Amended Record of Decision, and the second is the proposed Butte Priority Soils Operable Unit Consent Decree. These two documents work closely together. The amended record of decision adds several important new or supplemental elements to the cleanup EPA initially established in the 2006 record of decision. The proposed consent decree implements this cleanup. It defines a scope of work, establishes who will do the work, sets deadlines for the work, establishes who will pay for the work, and outlines the consequences if the work is not done as required. These documents identify a final set of actions needed to address historic mining contamination, which will protect people's health and the environment in Butte and secure the financial resources to take those actions. And they do so in a way that goes beyond Superfund cleanup requirements to meet the community's desire for land reuse and enhanced amenities along Silver Bow Creek and beyond. For example, a cleanup obtained under a unilateral order would not include the end land use plans, which are part of the proposed consent decree statement of work, nor would it include the payments to the EPA or the state that are in the proposed consent decree. The new aspects of the cleanup will remove contaminated tailings at the north side and Diggings East tailings areas and along Silver Bow and Blacktail Creeks. It will remove contaminated sediment from Silver Bow and Blacktail Creeks. It will treat more contaminated stormwater to keep that water out of the creeks. It will cap and revegetate additional isolated mine waste areas on Butte Hill, and it will capture and treat more contaminated groundwater. This is in addition to the ongoing cleanup work, such as the operation of the Butte treatment lagoons, which are currently successfully capturing and treating groundwater. This work is estimated to cost over $150 million and is in addition to the over $200 million the Atlantic Richfield Company has spent to date in Butte. The proposed consent decree specifies how all of that work will be implemented, monitored, and evaluated to make sure the results of the work are protective of human health and the environment. The amended ROD also expands the residential metals abatement program to more homes in Butte and Silver Bow County. It will now cover residences in areas of the county that are outside of the Butte Priority Soils Operable Unit and within Silver Bow County. This highly effective and nationally recognized program will further improve the public health of Butte and Silver Bow County. The EPA will implement the expanded RMAP program through a unilateral administrative order that it will issue to Atlantic Richfield and Butte Silver Bow. The use of this order to implement the RMAP and the medical monitoring requirements of the ROD will allow the agencies more time to develop a revised RMAP plan. The proposed consent decree includes a $20.5 million payment from Atlantic Richfield to the state of Montana, which Montana DEQ will use to clean up the Blacktail Creek area. Leftover funds, which may be substantial, can be transferred to the Montana Natural Resource Damage Program for use in Butte. The proposed agreement also provides for enhanced community benefits, including along the Silver Bow Creek corridor. As many of you know, EPA has worked closely with the state, Silver Bow, Butte Silver Bow, the Atlantic Richfield Company, and various community groups like SeekTech and ROC, to develop an end land use plan for Silver Bow and Blacktail Creek, including the Silver Bow Creek corridor above its confluence with Blacktail Creek. This plan, which goes beyond Superfund cleanup requirements, will provide substantial economic and recreational benefits to the community. I'd also like to emphasize that this proposed consent decree offers an opportunity to move forward with a clear understanding of all the parties of the path forward. It will do so by settling many years of outstanding liability claims and counterclaims between EPA, the state of Montana, and the Atlantic Richfield Company so that our energy and resources can be put towards the cleanup. I'd also like to touch on the discussions over the past week about the location of a repository for the waste that are removed from Blacktail Creek, the Parrott Tailings area, and other locations. I want to make two things clear. First, no final decision has been made about the destination for waste removed as part of the cleanup. EPA will work with the state, Butte-Silver, and Atlantic Richfield, as well as the Butte community, to identify safe and appropriate repositories. Second, with respect to the Timber Butte location, I want to emphasize that the area immediately adjacent to the Timber Butte neighborhood was never under consideration as part of the repository. A map was included in the consent decree package that included this area as a potential repository, and that was an error. We have corrected that map and will include the new map in the package that goes to Chief Executive Palmer for signature, and if approved by you, will ultimately go to the court for approval. We are considering area next to the Copper Mountain Complex, which is already a repository for 2.1 million cubic yards of waste, as a potential location for a much smaller amount of additional waste material. We think this could be done safely in a way that will improve the overall attractiveness of that area. If the council would like more information on this or any other issue, EPA is always happy to answer your questions. Thank you for your consideration of these important documents. After appropriate deliberation, I urge you to authorize the county executive to sign the consent decree so that we may lodge the document with the district court and begin the public comment process that will be part of the court's consideration of the consent decree. As I stated, we are always available to assist with the council's questions as you move forward. Thank you. And now turn over the mic to Patrick Holmes from the governor's office.
Thank you, Betsy. Council of Commissioners, good evening. My name is Patrick Holmes. I serve as Governor Bullock's Natural Resources Policy Advisor. On behalf of Governor Bullock, the state of Montana is pleased to be here to lend our support to the council as you begin your review and deliberations of this proposed consent decree. All the parties deserve a great deal of credit for getting us to this juncture in the review process and for their hard work and collegiality throughout the negotiations. But I do want to particularly acknowledge Chief Executive Palmer and the Butte-Silver team for their thoughtful and committed efforts on behalf of this community. I can assure you that their insistence we put the community at the forefront of our considerations was invaluable to us finding agreement among the parties, and also very helpful to overcoming many of the issues we encountered along the way. The state has been pleased to see that same thoughtful and committed approach from the team through the community dialogues and open houses that have occurred over the past week. And we want you all to know that the state remains committed to that sustained community engagement in support of your process and as we move forward. The Governor's Office, the Montana Department of Environmental Quality, and the Natural Resources Damage Program at the Montana Department of Justice have provided a coordinated approach to represent the state in these negotiations. Throughout this process, the state has been focused on strengthening the integrity of the overall remedy. As I've said previously, our team believes the proposal is technically sound, plans for appropriately for contingencies and risks, and provides for appropriate financial assurances. We believe this proposal reflects an effective cleanup, especially when considering the cumulative efforts across the Butte Priority Soils Operable Unit, including the governor's leadership to implement the Parrott Tailings Removal Project. The state, as Betsy mentioned, envisions a significant leadership role in this proposal. Most significantly, as part of the $20.5 million settlement that's proposed, the state will be leading efforts to undertake remedial actions in the Blacktail Creek corridor. Following completion of that work, the state expects approximately half of the proceeds to be available for restoration and then land use needs, specifically repaying funds used to complete Phase 2 of the Parrott project, ultimately contributing about a third of the overall project costs for the Parrott through this settlement. The state also, as I previously mentioned, intends to set aside $1 million to support the vision of Restore Our Creek to complete a line creek above the confluence of Blacktail and Silverbow Creeks. We stand ready to answer your questions and support your deliberations. As I mentioned previously, the governor will be reviewing the community's feedback as he considers his decision regarding final signature and lodging of the consent decree. So with that, I'll turn things over to Patricia Gallery from Atlantic Richfield. Thank you.
Chief Executive Palmer, members of the council, good evening. My name is Patricia Gallery. I am a vice president for Atlantic Richfield Company. I'm here tonight to speak to you in support of the proposed Butte Priority Soils Operable Consent Decree. First, I want to explain and give you a little background on why Atlantic Richfield supports the Butte Consent Decree. As you know, in simple terms, a CD is really just a written contract among parties. The parties must agree to all the terms, and it is accomplished, and when that is accomplished, this simple contract, all 1,000 pages plus, will be submitted to the court, but everyone has to agree on the contract. It becomes legally binding. Atlantic Richfield supports this consent decree and is willing to sign on the dotted line because we believe this CD does settle long-standing legal and technical disputes between the parties, and we believe it does it in a very fair manner for all parties. So all parties over these last few years have aligned on what the remedy actually is. Yes, it's taken us nearly 13 years to get there, but those years were not idle at all. They were spent gathering information, data that was needed to identify the most productive and appropriate and protective remedy. This site is complex. I know everybody has heard that, but what it really means is that there are mountains, there's hills, there's gullies, there's streets, and there's buildings, and all of that impacts and influences how surface water, rainwater, snow, how all of that flows and where it goes. And there are differences of opinion on how that works. There are thousands of miles of underground workings which impact how groundwater flows, and there are differences of opinion on how that works, technical differences. There are streams, creeks, wetlands here in this town, and how best do we protect them from historical mining? Butte rightly calls itself the richest hill on earth, and with over 100 years and counting of mining Butte's rich minerals, how do you account for the minerals that are present naturally? All of those questions, all of those things had to be addressed. The parties worked through all of this over these last years, and we resolved challenges and the complexities, and the proposed consent decree in front of you for consideration is the outcome of all the parties, past and present team members. I have been part of these discussions, meetings, and negotiations for only about 4.5 years, and it's took me the larger part of a year to really understand just the acronyms, just the lingo. So Atlantic Richfield believes the CD, if approved, would provide a permanent, protective, and importantly, a sustainable remedy with proven technologies that work in this environment. The remedy components are feasible to operate and maintain long into the future. We support the CD because it successfully integrates remedy components with community input and vision for Butte's future and the land use that they would like to see here. We have listened very carefully over these last few years, and we believe it will indeed transform the heart of Butte from an environmental liability into an asset for many generations. You should also know that we are not done listening. Butte citizens told us they wanted more waste removed in those corridors. This remedy accomplishes that. We know that Butte citizens and you as commissioners want to understand where that waste will go. Atlantic Richfield doesn't make that decision. That authority resides with EPA in consultation with the state of Montana. There is a process and there is criteria for selecting where waste repositories are located. There must be an evaluation. Considerations have to include how suitable technically, engineering-wise, and how feasible that location is from an engineering perspective. What is the topography? What is the volume? What is the distance it has to go? How safe can we make our transport? Is it in trucks? Is it a conveyor? All of those things and considerations go into making that. And least of all, or most of all, it requires community input in that process. And that hasn't been done yet. We have not done that yet. The analysis is yet to be completed. And we have listened, and we have expanded our thinking, and we are looking at all appropriate locations. They're all still on the table. So I pause here and say, in the coming months, Atlantic Richfield and Butte-Silver will need to sit down and determine how the allocation agreement we have in place will be amended to ensure all the future costs and negotiations continue to be funded by Atlantic Richfield. A large part of them are being implemented by the county, and we think that's the right thing to do. So, Chief Executive Palmer and members of the council, I am proud to stand here tonight on behalf of Atlantic Richfield to express our complete support for the proposed consent decree and to reinforce the commitment to you and the citizens of Butte that we have to this community through the consent decree. But we're not enough. All the parties have to agree to this consent decree, this settlement agreement, this contract, before it can move forward to the court. So in closing, the CD parties, I think, really respectfully submit our support of it to you and now look for you to decide, as the governing body of Butte and representing all the citizens of Butte, we wish you to vote in approval of the consent decree. We sincerely hope that you do. My team and the Atlantic Richfield Company is available for questions, and we're here to support you if you need additional information, you have more questions. I do thank you for your time tonight.
Okay, well, thank you so much for the three statements, and I want to get through this as quickly as possible so we can get to questions that you'll have. The priority soils operable unit, as we've talked about it many times, stretches from the top of the hill in Walkerville down to the Timber Butte down south, and from the Berkeley Pit to the west part of our urban area. It incorporates all kinds of properties, residential, commercial, and industrial, and significant extents of Blacktail and Silverbow Creek. The one word that I want to concentrate on in this slide is that word defendant. Butte-Silver is a defendant in this consent decree and this lawsuit, if you will. And I've said this a few times, but just for the record, to make sure everybody understands why that occurred, it was determined in the early 90s that because Butte-Silver-Bow's stormwater system conveyed mining waste from the hill to the creek, we got named a responsible party. Now, the law is pretty clear. Owner, operator, transporter, or generator of waste puts you in that category of a responsible party. We were named a PRP because of our stormwater system, and that instigated a process by which we had to take responsibility for the mine waste and start this negotiation with ARCO and the regulatory agencies moving forward. In so doing, Butte-Silver-Bow's mantra, our tenets in dealing with that liability, has been threefold. We've said it before, and for the record, we'll say it again. The first priority for us was our taxpayers. Now, this is notwithstanding our second priority and our third priority, but as your representatives in these negotiations, it was vitally important to make sure that our taxpayers in this community did not have to bear the costs of being a responsible party. That was primary. The second priority was the resource. We had to do everything possible to make sure that we were protecting human health and the environment, and to minimize any negative impacts of historic mining. And then thirdly is something we added. We didn't believe a remedial action was complete unless there was a beneficial use and an end land use that benefited our community. This has been manifested in several projects, from the Granite Mountain Memorial to the Foreman's Park to the original, to the Missoula ball fields, to the other projects to the Copper Mountain Sports Complex, to the Visitor Center on George Street, and then the ancillary projects that were done through the NRD program, the Skyline Park, the Big Butte Open Space Project, improvements to Thompson Park, and most importantly, the more than $100 million investment that's been made in our drinking water system. Those improvements are inextricably tied to this consent decree and the efforts we made to make sure that this third tenant, that we get a benefit to participating in this process as a responsible party. The process to come to consensus has not been easy. We started in the 90s. There were many investigations, and that all led to a lot of work, a lot of what were called time-critical removal actions, emergency response actions that led to the cleanup of the Lower Area 1 and the Colorado tailings, the beginnings of our stormwater improvements to route water to said basins on the Hill. Many activities, 178 sites on the Hill were accessible mine waste were removed and taken to the repository and capped with vegetative covers. That happened between 92 and 2006, and it came to this this record of decision was issued at that time on the cleanup, and there was dissent. And so for the next 5 years, from 06 to 11, we tried to resolve those issues, and quite frankly, could not. And that led to a unilateral order in 2011 where the Environmental Protection Agency, in consultation with the state of Montana, ordered the responsible parties, which were the Atlantic Richfield Company and by extension Butte-Silver Bow, and by extension all of us, to take under a bunch of work. We rebuilt the settling ponds to deal with the groundwater pollution. We had to expand the RMAP program to include the attics, and many other things were ordered at that time and were accomplished. And we had we weren't sure whether we were ever going to get to a consent decree. And then in 2015, the parties got back together, led by, quite frankly, Governor Bullock and his willingness to take the first step to deal with the Parrott project, using money that was granted to the state for what was called the Butte Area 1 cleanup. He said, let's get this going. It was at our behest that he did that and got the parties back in the room to say, okay, I'll do this, but if it leads to a consent decree so we can resolve all these issues for Butte. And then 3 years later, a mere 3 years later, we got to an agreement in principle, which laid out the framework for the document that is in front of us today. In the spring of 18, we came out with what was called the key elements. In May of 18, in which generally we'll describe here in a second, were the 9 major projects that we had agreed to in the agreement in principle. And then that led to this amendment to the Record of Decision of 2006, and now a draft consent decree for our consideration here in 2020. It has been a monumental task to get the federal government first to agree with the state government on how they were going to regulate us, and then to get those two parties to agree with the settling defendants, and primarily the Atlantic Richfield Company, in compelling them to pay for all this work and to complete the tasks that are outlined. But we got there, and as was mentioned, I'll cut through this. We heard this already. We believe it protects the environment, it protects human health, and it provides the long-term assurance that we had been wanting to achieve. It is a complex document. The consent decree itself provides the legal framework on all the provisions that the attorneys worked hard on to deal with everybody's liabilities and the releases from claims, and to make sure the money was right and the money was there to get the job done, and that there were important provisions in the agreement to make sure there was a way to reopen this agreement and order additional work if the work that is accomplished needs to be improved, adjusted, or otherwise modified. The key to this is in Appendix A, with respect to what Ms. Schmidinger said about the amendment to the Record of Decision. Very important document, because it really responds to the dissent of the 2006 document. People said it should have done this, it should have done this, it should have done this, etc. And I'm pleased to be able to tell you that in this amendment, we addressed the issues that were seen as deficient or not complete in that Record of Decision of 2006. Also, you'll note that in Appendix A is the response. The proposed plan came out in the spring of 19. Many comments were made. In this Appendix A is the responses to all those comments that were made last spring. And then the other important piece is Appendix D and appendix attachments to that, which lay out specifically how the site will be monitored, how we will measure performance, and what we will do if we achieve performance, what we will do if we do not. It's a pretty thorough blueprint of the what, the work that's got to get done, and how we're going to measure that performance. But I'll add right now that there are many steps. Should this consent decree get through the court and lodged, then we have to go to work. There are many work projects outlined in this document that will require design documents, construction documents, bidding documents, and then the work products and the work itself. All that will be open now. We as your staff, but the regulators in EPA and the Department of Environmental Quality, and they have to approve these. They have committed to make sure that this is an open process so that we will share the design details as we move forward. This will be a string of challenges, and our collective efforts to build and make solutions to those challenges as we go forward. There's a lot of work to do, and we're all anxious to really get on with the cleaning up of our community and building those end land uses that we are proud of. The improvements, I'm going to skip through this very quickly. It was mentioned by in the statements about the removal of the sediments from Blacktail and Silverboat Creeks, the removal of the contaminated tailings in the Silverboat Creek corridor, the restoration and remediation of Blacktail Creek from Carl Avenue. I'm going to go through these with individual slides. Those last two, very important. The expansion and improvement of the systems to capture and treat contaminated groundwater, as well as stormwater. Those were a couple of major issues that we had to resolve in getting to a consent decree, and very important developments as it relates to this consent decree in terms of its sustainability in the long run. On the soil improvement side, this really has to do with eliminating exposure by humans to any soil and rainwater hitting soil that finds its way into the stormwater system and finds its way into Silverbow Creek. As I mentioned earlier, we have spent the better part of 2 decades trying to eliminate exposure to soils, and this part of the consent decree says, hey, you missed a couple dozen sites that you did already that you didn't do as well as you should have. We'll go back and take care of those. There's another 3 dozen sites that were never done in the first place because of the way the standards and the system worked. Now we're going to go back and take care of that. And most importantly, we're going to have a process to identify additional sites over time. And we have learned our lessons about native grasses to make sure that we just don't put these monocultures over the tops of these caps and expect them to be sustained in the long run. We've got to weave in native plants to make sure that these caps are sustainable. As was mentioned, there's a set of projects that we'll go over in individual detail, but as you can see, the concentration of the work, other than what I just mentioned about getting back to those caps on the hill, the concentration of work is in the Silverbow Creek corridor and the Blacktail Creek corridor, and the work that will be done is focused on those 2 main things I said earlier. We've got to do better to get tailings out of groundwater's way, so the groundwater continue to improve, starting with the Parrot project up on the top and through these other areas, and then deal with the stormwater and make sure the stormwater coming out the hill is as clean as possible, but to whatever extent it's not, particularly during storms, we want to build a series of set basins so that we can drop out the metals and make sure the water reaching Silverbow Creek continues to improve and improve. This is the overview. A lot of you have seen who have participated in the public meetings so far. This is the outline. Take them one at a time. The north side digging, north side tailings up there just south of Casey Street, and we're going to do a removal, at least 75,000 cubic yards. Install a basin to collect that first wash when it rains in Butte and the stormwater comes off the hill. The first several minutes and hours of that rainfall brings sediment down the hill, and so the purpose of this first set of basins is to create a basin that we can clean after every storm, so we can get that sediment out of the system. And then I'm going there. I can't see and walk at the same time. All right. So then then after that first washout in this forebay, then the water will be allowed to proceed to the east, the diggings east area. In this case, a series of set basins, so that the water goes, the stormwater, when it goes from basin to basin, it continues to drop out. This technology is proven. We've used it on the hill for more than 20 years. We've have 3 set basins up on the hill. They have worked well, and so having a couple, 2, 3 more on the bottom of the hill is seen as the best approach for us to get water, metals and sediments out of the flow of water before it reaches Silverbow Creek. In this area, approximately 230,000 cubic yards of historic mine waste will be removed from groundwater's way and be replaced with these, and these set of basins will be constructed, and then the end land use we'll talk about later, but it will be done in a way, and I might as well talk about it now. When we came to the conclusion that the best approach to protect the water resources in Butte was to get those tailings out of water's way and build these sed basins. The Butte people, as we always do, we stood up and says, well, yeah, but what's it going to look like? And is this going to be consistent with the community's goals to make sure this corridor looks as good as it can? And hence the effort to build an end-use plan that we can be proud of, and to make sure that this becomes yet another end land use that comports with our goal, number 3, and that's to make sure a remedial project results in something good that benefits our community. The Grove Gulch piece is down below the interstate, and it comes from the Timber Butte area. It follows the old Main Street right away and then manifests itself just on the east side, of Caw Avenue. There'll be the construction of a sed basin there so that any of the contaminants coming from that direction can drop out, and we can protect Blacktail Creek as well. The Buffalo Gulch is sort of the main drainage when we're talking about what comes off the hill. As many of you know, to the extent that you're east of Main Street and east of Wyoming Street and above Iron Street, all that water is being routed to the Berkeley Pit as part of a decision we made in 1999 and built a big pipeline to take that water that way. Below Iron Street, east of Main Street, that goes to that North Diggings sed basin. But basically between Montana Street and Utah Street, all of that water coming off the hill finds its way in what's called Buffalo Gulch, and we're going to use this area above George Street to, again, create a series of ponds to drop out those metals and incorporate that into the end land use. Then the piece on the other side, below George Street, is Blacktail Creek. Now, this project will be completed by the state of Montana. They estimate a couple 100,000 cubic yards, but they have not really done the specific engineering yet. But suffice it to say that their plan will rebuild Blacktail Creek from essentially just east of Caw Avenue to its confluence, to Blacktail Creek's confluence with Silverbow Creek. There'll be removals of the tailings in the stream bed and in the underground that are touching the groundwater, and it will result in approximately 2,000 linear feet of improvement as it goes back by the KOA and our visitor center. The last project that you've heard of is across the street, across Montana Street. Right now, you can see that black line at the top of the screen. That's where Silverbow Creek is now. It's lodged between the two slag canyon walls, by the bowling alley there, and past Milo's, and coming down into the what's called Lower Area 1. In this case, approximately 165,000 cubic yards will be removed in a 275-foot swath, and then in its place, a new channel will be built, and then Silverbow Creek will be taken out of the slag canyon and placed in the new channel, complete with a set of amenities that have been agreed to be constructed by Atlantic Richfield, again, based on our end land use, wanting to make sure that it's one thing to clean the environment and protect ourselves from these contaminants, but wanting to have an end land use that really contributes to our community's future. I talked about this already with respect to the unreclaimed and the insufficiently reclaimed sites on the hill. That's a big deal. And on the left is the ones that we're going to go back and repair. The ones on the right are the ones that never got done in the first place that need attention, because now, at first, when we were up on the hill and doing the 178 sites, we were dealing with exposure to mercury, lead, and arsenic. Now we got to go back and make sure we have capped all mine waste areas that are contributing copper, zinc, and any of the heavy metals that find their way into stormwater. So this is a big deal. We've taken criticism and over the years that we got to do better with these caps, and this particular work plan does just that. There's a fairly difficult one. I'll just cut to chase here. These areas in this map are what we call uncaptured surface flows, and these are just when it rains. There's sheet feed stormwater going every which way but loose, particularly in that area west of Montana Street and below the interstate. We got to do better to capture that stormwater if we're serious about meeting standards in Silverbow Creek. This is not as well defined yet because more research has to be done, but it's included in the work plan because it's very important. We've talked quite a bit about waste removals and disposal. I think that the parties have explained we are obligated under this consent decree to find the safest way to dispose of these wastes. It's very important to understand that all of these work plans that I have gone through quickly, and I realize that, all of them will have impacts on our community. Digging up of the waste is going to cause impacts. Transporting of the waste is going to cause impacts, and then finding the right place to put it will cause impacts. And you know, we will have to lean on the patience of our community. We've set out an ambitious goal to get these projects done. You know, it's going to take 5 years to get this done, and we got to go through a lot of regulations to make sure we're following all the rules, dotting our I's and crossing our T's to get it done. But we are obligated to do that, and the disposal piece is no different. And we've got a lot of work to do to identify the appropriate areas. The one piece that we haven't talked about is the protection of human health. For a variety of reasons, we have segregated this from the consent decree. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done, but through the consent decree, we will be getting a unilateral administrative order simultaneously with the consent decree, and that will compel Butte-Silver Bow and Atlantic Richfield to draft a plan and define a scope of work for the expanded area and to expand the program to make it more than 8,000 additional homes eligible, and expand the health studies initiative to include and ensure long-term blood testing, medical monitoring, and reliable data collection to make sure that that data can be made available to guide the projects that we will do subsequently. When we were named a PRP and up through the record of decision in 2006, we were confined to the area in the blue. Then in 2011, under the unilateral order, we were allowed to expand the RMAP program to the areas in orange, and also start with our attic program. And then now under this set of actions, we will be able to expand the program to the areas in green. So the better part of all the urban areas in our county will be eligible for this program. I will make one more point about the human health aspect of our proceedings, and that is we as a community stepped up in the 90s and said that the Superfund process is not good enough in terms of meeting the demands. In 1992, more than 10% of our children were testing high for lead in their bloods. And there was this Superfund program going on, and said, okay, well, let's take care of business through Superfund. Well, it turns out the Superfund program was designed to deal with lead in soil, not necessarily the lead that was finding its way into our children. And so we, as a community, devised what was called the multi-pathway program that allowed us to make sure that whatever pathway was getting into our children, how the lead was, where we went to address it. And so we came up with this program, and we pitched it to ARCO, and they were only obligated to deal with the lead in the soil at the time. And we said, well, why don't we take whatever resources you were going to spend on that and allow us to do it our way. And that led to the multi-pathway program, which has been largely successful over these last many decades of eliminating lead poisoning in our children. We still have some cases that we deal with on a case-by-case basis, but by and large, by implementing the multi-pathway program from a human health-driven perspective, we have been successful. Now, there's more work to do. We want to add medical monitoring. We want to expand the scope of the program. We want to maybe speed up how quickly we have been able to get to the addicts. We do about 100 a year. Maybe we need to do more. We maybe need to do them quicker. All that is encompassed in the expansion of the program as we move forward under the consent decree and its sister agreement, the unilateral order. We've talked about the funding. Atlantic Richfield, through the consent decree, is required to provide the financial assurance to do the work, which includes the 9 projects that I went over, but just as importantly, to provide long-term sustainable funding for the operations and maintenance of all the work and the entire remedy, to make sure there's enough money to monitor the work very seriously over the course of the forever, and to provide the funds for the regulatory agencies to provide their oversight, and to Butte-Silver Bow to provide the institutional controls and enforcement of those issues that we've put in place, our groundwater control areas, our excavation permit system, stormwater development permit system, the restrictive covenants, to make sure that we are on top of when people are digging. And it was a long time coming when we put the excavation permitting process in place in 2011. We had to start to change the culture in Butte, where we pretty much dug wherever we wanted to, whenever we wanted to. And now we have a system in place that at least allows us to monitor where people are digging, and if they run into metals, we have the resources to, or the programs to be able to deal properly with those, take those soils to the repository and bring back clean soils and make sure that we're not undoing any of the cleanup activities we've put in place. And then the funding that will be made available for the end land use construction that we've talked about in the corridor, so that the Silver Bow Creek Conservation Area, which was designed to emulate the one in Billings, we've talked about it many times. We said, okay, if we're going to use the land for stormwater management, let's make it look good. And it turns out that many cities across the country and in Montana are moving in the same direction. We've got to deal with stormwater, but let's deal with it in a way that produces an end land use. And so the same consultants who designed that project were retained by Atlantic Richfield, and they put that together. They paid for the design work, and then they're going to pay for the construction through the terms of this consent decree. The last slide I got is our allocation agreement. There was a reference to it earlier. We have one significant addition. Again, I've made presentations before the council in the past on our allocation agreement and the various trust funds that are in place. We developed that agreement in 2006 in coordination with the record of decision. The terms and conditions in that record of decision still serve us well today. There is presently approximately $47 million in the trust fund that would, on the operation and maintenance and the RMAP side of the ledger. There's a separate trust fund for the redevelopment trust, approximately $14 million still in that one. And in this case, the consent decree provides for the addition of a new trust for the sanitary sewer infrastructure. One of the demands that Butte-Silver Bow placed in the mix of these negotiations was that one of the biggest threats to our long-term economic development and our operation of our metro sewer treatment plant is all the water that infiltrates into our sanitary collection system when it rains. On rain events, more than twice as much water that comes through on an average day in Butte comes through when it's raining. Answer: we have a dilapidated sanitary collection system. There are some cases where pipes do not even exist anymore and the water is just percolating through the ground and finding its way to our metro sewer treatment plant. But more importantly, there are pipes that are leaking. We call it inflow and infiltration, an I&I program. And so we negotiated a new program that we will put in place. We actually started 2 years ago, as I have reported to the council, to do the analysis. A lot of us have had to deal with smoke testing in our neighborhoods, where we start to identify where the main areas are, where we have infiltration of stormwater into the sanitary system, and then they will go on a priority list of projects that we will be able to accomplish over the next 30 years. We'll set up the trust so we can spend, a certain amount of money each year to deal with that problem. And then once this all shakes out and we understand exactly how many additional obligations there might be, there'll be additional dollars put in to the trust for our responsibilities. And I'll close by saying that the terms of the allocation agreement still serve us well, because the way it reads is that if there is ever no more money, all of the obligations that Butte-Silver Bowl has agreed to do revert back to the Atlantic Richfield Company. It's very clear, and the terms of that agreement have served us well since 2006 and will serve us well as we move into the future. It turns out that the process moving forward I had kind of gummed up, so if you have some questions about that, I will turn to the EPA. I'm not supposed to use the word entered with the federal court. It should be lodged with the federal court. The other parties have to sign, and Judge Haddon is replaced by the Department of Justice, will be considering the consent decree and opening up that 30-day comment period. And so if you have any additional questions on the process moving forward, we'll be glad to answer those. The next part and the last part of our presentation tonight is to answer questions. We have had a great 3 weeks in terms of meeting with the public, a lot of coffee, conversations over coffee, conversations at service clubs, and conversations at workshops that we've held at various places and times around town. We've gotten a lot of interest. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback. We've gotten a lot of questions that we've been able to answer. They have generally started to be addressed, but we believe we have a proposal that does answer the questions we've been asked. It's been a very, I think, good public process. People are getting educated. They're getting familiar with the content of the CD. They're asking great questions, and they're getting answers to their questions. We got a lot of work to do going forward, but as we now pass the baton to the council, and we just want to close by offering our support. If you guys want district meetings, if you want, we'll be there. If you want us to set up any additional workshops to talk about additional topics that are of interest to your constituents, we'll be there to help and answer the questions the best we can. So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chief Executive, we'll turn it back to you to manage the question and answer period.
Okay, thanks, John, Betsy, Patricia, Patrick. I appreciate your showing up tonight to answer questions. This time I'll call on Commissioner Olson to give his input into this process.
Thank you, Chief Executive Palmer. I think the importance of this meeting is pretty substantial. It's the point at which the baton has passed, as John stated, to us and to the public at this point, since as elected officials we represent the public that has elected us. I think there's a lot more education that is needed, and there are some topics that weren't fully covered in the other education sessions that we need to press forward on. At this point, the ball's in our court. It's up to us to get fully educated and encourage the public to do so that they understand what the decision is before us. I think we need to also consider the process that John has talked about, where at this point it's still an education situation where we're getting educated about the CD as it's being presented, and the time for comments will be after it has been signed by the parties and has been lodged with the court and the Department of Justice. So that's not that we don't welcome comments and whatever, but the official point where your comments will have an impact on the outcome of the CD is really after it's been lodged with the court and during, I believe it's a 30-day time period. I think that's about it. I think we should probably open it up for questions from the council members and see if we have a lot of folks here in the audience tonight that can answer those questions for you. So if there are some pressing issues, any questions that you have, let's take the baton and start getting educated. Thank you.
Thanks. Are there any commissioners that have any questions for any of the people in the audience this evening? And if you don't have them tonight, feel free. You've got plenty of time to come up with your questions, and we'll get them to the appropriate people that need to have them answered for you. There's a lot of people. We have the DEQ, the whole state staff, and EPA, Atlantic Richfield, Butte-Silver. We're all ready to answer questions for you, and if we don't have the answer, we will get it for you so you have the right information. But this evening, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Commissioner Shea.
Thank you, Chief Executive Palmer. I don't have any questions tonight, but I would like to acknowledge all of the individuals who, both in the public and part of the teams, who have been working very hard to educate me on this subject. It's a very complex issue, and there is no simple solution, and there is no one right answer. And it's going to be a question of where we have to bring all of the information we have in front of us, and we have to make the best educated decision that we can. And so I would encourage everybody to attend any future sessions that are scheduled in their districts. I've already scheduled one and had one. It was great. I know that the rest of the commissioners are looking at doing that too. I suspect there will be a lot more opportunity for face-to-face meetings where there's no parliamentary procedure. It's a little less stodgy. It's a little more relaxed. Those atmospheres are the best for getting your questions answered. So I would really encourage you to take advantage of those. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Sorge.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the great presentation. I think there's always bits and pieces we're still trying to gain our knowledge a little bit here and there. By looking at the turnout of the people, I think they're starving for information also. So I would really like to see if, like Commissioner Shea was saying, maybe to have some more public in smaller groups within our districts. I think that would be a good thing for me. The last time I seen this many people in the chambers like this, they were talking about dogs at the animal shelter. So I'm really happy to see the people here tonight. And again, I'm sure they want to know more.
Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Chief Executive Palmer. I guess I have a couple questions, but will we be going back on the agenda to take public comment on any items on the consent agenda when you change that? Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. I do have a question. Question is for whoever wants to answer it is, everything in the consent decree is good. It's a great document. It's good. Why would we go this far, getting everything good, and ignore the first part of the CRIC where Judge Newman had a ruling, and he's made a public comment that we, commissioners, and the state of Montana should have a little bit of reluctance in signing this consent decree when the state of Montana and the locals had a lawsuit and Judge Newman declared it a creek, and we're ignoring that part of this consent decree. It's in there, and there's still a discrepancy. And Judge Newman is in the audience today, and he will speak here sometime today and may want to speak a little later on it. But why, when we went this far, would we just let that little bit have these people in our community not be happy? I mean, you got $20.5 million to go around the berm there, and whatever's left, which might not be any left. That was a manganese plant. They blew up a stack there and dropped all the... There might not be any money left. But if there's money left, it goes to the state of Montana, is my understanding, and that will be used to restore the creek from Texas Avenue to down by the chamber. Why would we end something like that? That minute little point would make so many people in this community happy and make this consent decree so much easier for us all to just digest. Why did we stop there and not go any further? Thank you.
Patrick, I'll let you tackle this one. Oh, yeah, there you go.
Am I on
Thank
now?
you.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner, for the question. Certainly, I want to acknowledge at the onset that we have really valued from the exchanges we've had with community members regarding a restored Upper Silver Bow Creek corridor. And I think that exchange has meaningfully impacted the proposal that's before you for your consideration. I do want to note that there are many places in there where the end land use components and other factors have changed in the interest of accommodating that potential future vision, and we view that as an important initial step. The governor, as part of this process, did early on commit to identifying some resources that could further the objectives of restoring and establishing a lined creek corridor across that first mile, and has set aside some resources to seed that potential future outcome. I do think all of the parties believe that there are opportunities for us to incorporate certain components of the future restoration vision that's been identified into the remedial work that we're doing, and look forward to those continued conversations as we undergo remedial design in this process. At the end of the day, there is some limit to how much can be done, I think, concurrently with the process of establishing the remediation out on the landscape. I think in many cases we want to see the performance of that remedy. There are a lot of complicating factors related to groundwater capture, related to the stormwater basins, related to monitoring of the sediments and other things that we really need to optimize and make sure are functioning correctly before we introduce additional uncertainty and complication to the remedy. But that said, I think that there is a pathway to support the vision moving forward, provided that the community as a whole continues to prioritize that work. And the state of Montana will continue to support that work, looks forward to the continued conversations with Restore Our Creek and others. And we certainly want to make sure that we're abiding by the lawsuit and appropriately responding to the judge's decision. So.
Follow-up, Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Chief Executive Palmer. Thank you. I appreciate the answer. I guess my concern is the state of Montana paid the attorney, Mr. Getz from Bozeman, over $170,000, and they lost that lawsuit. If they felt that that wasn't correct, why didn't they appeal that decision? I mean, if they don't feel that creek was part of the cleanup effort, why was that decision not appealed? I mean, we're talking $150 million. Why wouldn't we go back and add a little bit more? Now, you're offering $1 million to restore a creek, but that's not much money. And the $20.5 million could easily be used up going around the berm. I guess my concern is that is the number one issue concern of people in this community. There was one time 3,500 signatures. So I just don't know why we wouldn't take that extra step and satisfy a lot of the community. And I know there's reasons on your side and the other side, but that's one thing the community really wants, and that would be easier for everyone to digest if something was put in that consent decree to alleviate that issue that that's something we don't have to take. Thank you.
Commissioner Frederickson.
Thank you, Chief Executive Palmer. My question has to do with the waivers, so probably Mr. Sesso first. Thank you. Back when we were voting on the comments for the record of decision amendments, you had said that we would only be at least I think this is what you said, I could be mistaken, that we would only waive certain state of Montana in-stream surface water quality standards to the protective federal standards after the remedy. And then when I read this document, it seems, so my question to you is, looking at the document, it looks like right out of the gate, we're waiving the standards, the state of Montana standards to the federal standard. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to defer to the regulatory agencies to describe that. I will start by saying the one standard out of the gate is the total recoverable standard for copper and zinc during storms. And then there is another process I think that you're referring to, but I would like to refer this to Mr. Green, Nakia Green. He's the remedial project manager, and then others who may be able to be more precise.
Nakia, could you turn on that microphone, please? There you go. Thanks.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Fredrickson. My name is Nakia Green, Remedial Project Manager for Butte Priority Soils Operable Unit. To answer your question, I think the first thing that I'd like to say is that when we say the word waiver, it seems like it just goes away, right? But our CD accounts for a waiver to another standard. So it doesn't just go away. And John is correct, the upfront waiver is based off of the total recoverable state standard only for copper and zinc during wet weather events. Early on, we knew we had issues with stormwater, and we knew it was going to be a challenge to meet those standards. So we did extensive modeling. We kind of threw all the different best management practices at it, from catch basins to the whole kitchen sink, and modeled this effort on the Hill. And what we found, no matter what we did, no matter what we do, we're still not going to meet that total recoverable for copper and zinc. So those are the two upfront waivers. But the CD also allows for, after we build these catch basins, after we build this remedy, there'll be a period of time where we'll be adjusting and monitoring to get the most efficient treatment and settling, and figure out how much we can discharge. So there's a process there, and EPA is very, very hopeful that we can also meet those standards, so we won't have to waive to any other standard. But the CD does account for, I guess you can call them kick-out waivers. If that process doesn't work, then we would waive to the federal standard, but only for the two metals.
Patrick.
So I just wanted to add to that the state's concurrence with the ROD amendment is predicated on Atlantic Richfield implementing all the technically practicable remedial elements that are described both in the ROD amendment that was announced, as well as more fully described in the consent decree. And we believe that change to the federal acute aquatic life standards based on a dissolved sample is protective of surface water quality, in part because all of the contaminated sediments will be removed and replaced with clean sediments. And by and large, the contaminant pathways to these sediments will be addressed through the remedial actions that are now required. So I want you to be assured that the state's use of those waivers, those additional waivers that were discussed, is really based on everything being fully implemented that's identified in the CD. Thanks.
Follow-up, Commissioner Fredrickson.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
go ahead.
I wanted to clarify, Commissioner Fredrickson, what I said in the spring of 19, that the use of the dissolved standards instead of the total recoverable standard during storms would only be allowed if and to the extent that the consent decree compelled all the work that is in here. So it was a chicken, and I don't know which one comes first, but the waiver to the dissolved standard would not have been done unless the consent decree specified all the additional work, essentially all the conditions of getting that variance to the federal standard. And I would also add that you have to still meet the dissolved standard during storms. We have to meet it, of course, when it's not raining, but for copper and zinc, we have to meet the dissolved standard during storms. And so it's not like there's no standard during storms for copper and zinc. We are compelled to meet the dissolved standards as opposed to the total recoverable standard on the books here in Montana.
Follow-up?
Yeah, so that kind of gets into my follow-up on, and for everyone that's following, it's Attachment A to Appendix D, page 59 out of 269. So you can grab your consent decree and look it up. It's 7.3, further waivers. It says any further waiver of in-stream surface water ARAR performance standards granted by EPA and DEQ would include a replacement standard which would become the in-stream surface water quality performance standard, and then it says see figure 7.3, which is these flow charts that are handy. But my question is, so it says it's going to be granted by EPA and DEQ. I'm just wondering, I mean, that's a pretty broad set of groups. Who exactly is making this decision? Is it Mr. Green? Who at the state? How does this, because it seems to me you have further waivers in here. So you're implying that there's going to be further waivers. And so I guess my question is, how does that process, how does EPA and DEQ come up with this decision on yes or no, it's going to be a further waiver?
Thank you for the follow-up question. Thank you for the follow-up question, Commissioner Fredrickson. So it's a good question. And so what you see in the CD, everything that's proposed in there, specifically the catch basins, there's a volume, there's things for optimization. There's things for tying catch basins together. There's all these different things. 4 bays, John talked about it, right? All these different things. So what we're proposing in the consent decree, what we have there to work with, we will build it and then monitor it and figure out how it's most efficient, right? And then we allowed for a period of time to make adjustments to determine if and meet those standards you're talking about. So we don't have to waive to them. The decision comes from doing all that work, and it is always EPA in consultation with the state. So as a project manager, I worked very closely with the state project officer, Darrell Reed, and no decision is made without consulting with the state.
Commissioner Fredrickson.
This is my last one for now, probably. So, and this is for the EPA. If, let's say we end up not signing this, and would a unilateral order have these waivers in place, or by law can the EPA make these waivers in a unilateral order?
Betsy.
So I think at this point we couldn't answer that question. We're hoping not to get to that point. And as I've mentioned in my opening remarks, many of the things that are in the consent decree would not necessarily be in the unilateral order because it we have things in there now that go above and beyond what we can order through our statute. So at this point, directly to your question, I don't think we could answer that right now.
Okay. Commissioner McDonough.
Thanks, Chief Executive Palmer. Probably start off with Mr. Sesso. To that question, we hear from the public that why don't you just scrap the plan and go back to the table? And could you just inform us and the public what's the benefit of a unilateral order? I mean, I firmly support moving forward with a consent decree and educating ourselves. But I mean, is there a compelling argument that says a unilateral order is better than a consent decree?
Mr. Chief Executive, it would be my input to you that the parties have come to an agreement on a consent decree that offers us a great deal more than otherwise could be ordered under a unilateral order. The UAO does not give us any assurance in the future either that we would get what we have agreed to get at this point. The best example is the removal of the tailings. In the 2006 record of decision, the federal agency said that the collection and treatment of groundwater was sufficient to protect the environment. The state of Montana said that that might be true, but you can't demonstrate you're going to get all of the groundwater collected. So we think it would be better to remove the tailings in Waters Way, starting at the Parrott through the East Diggings and North Diggings and the Butte Reduction Works. So one of the ways we came to agreement is to do both. The tailings are going to be removed, and the groundwater collection system and treatment system is going to be expanded and improved. So that we got to through a consent decree. Again, as Ms. Smittinger just said, if we go to a unilateral order, we would have to go back to the letter of the law, and that is to determine whether or not it's sufficient to just do the groundwater collection and treatment system. And we'd be back to square one on achieving the dual objective that now is embodied in the consent decree. The other example with respect to the questions that were raised by Commissioner Frederickson on the standards. There is good science behind this conclusion that no matter what gets done, no matter how many best management practices we install, it's unlikely we're going to meet the total recoverable standard for copper and zinc during storms. In a non-consent decree, and we go to a unilateral order, it would have to deal with that specificity on, well, if you can't compel somebody to do something that's impossible. So in return for the waiver that's been negotiated in the consent decree, all the things that Mr. Holmes brought up on what the additional work has to be done by Atlantic Richfield to earn, if you will, the variance from that particular standard, among many that have to be met. And so then there's the whole business of the financial terms and the settling of the differences between the federal, state, local, and Atlantic Richfield that would not be in place. And so there has never been meant to say that, well, if we don't get the consent decree, we're going to get something worse. That is not the justification for the consent decree. It has been our focus on making sure we've met as many goals as we can and get the most protective remedy in combination with the restoration investments that we're going to be able to make through the consent of the parties under this document. So I think Betsy said it best. You know, we don't really want to go there. To whatever extent we don't get a consent decree, we are going back to the drawing board. And in our view, representing you in these negotiations, we've had enough of this in terms of not moving our community forward, making these decisions. If anybody thinks that there is a perfect decision for how to treat stormwater coming off this hill at an 11-degree pitch going into a creek that is skinnier than this table, they're wrong. It is an engineering challenge, and we have done our level best now to come up with a set of projects that is going to be the best effort everyone has agreed we can make to protect the water quality in Silver Bow Creek. So the consent decree gives us the opportunity to get after that work and to move forward with this particular operable unit, rather than going back to the fighting and the disagreement that has plagued us these last 14 years. I don't know if I answered your question.
Follow-up, Commissioner McDonough.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I asked a quick question for clarification. I just wanted everyone to realize, that there's a lot on the table and there's a lot at stake in this decision, but I agree that, 30 years of hard work and effort and bringing 4 parties to the table is a lot better alternative than trying to throw it out and start all over again. I can't even imagine how much further behind we'd be as a community for that, and I thank you for your answer. I just ask that, just to clarify, what's the difference? If we don't accept the plan, what is the alternative? And I think that you've answered it fully. My other follow-up question is we're not the only community in Montana that has requested a waiver for a water standard, are we? Is there another municipality in Montana that operates on a waiver of some sort?
Anaconda. I think the important thing is that in our case, with respect to this particular standard, again, the total recoverable standard for copper and zinc during storms, our incentive as Butte-Silver Bowl is that we're responsible for the rest of the town. All of our city below the interstate, and all that comes to the same stream as it relates to stormwater management. And so this waiver is very important in the context of our financial situation as the responsible party for all that stormwater. And it makes sense, it's reasonable, and most importantly, the use of the federal dissolved standard is protective of the stream and of the fish. And the other part of that has been, well, yeah, but there's a total recoverable standard for a reason. And it is true. And in order to get to a consent, the parties, Atlantic Richfield in particular, who's paying for all this, they had to agree if the sediments that accumulate back in the stream because of that waiver on copper and zinc, the agreement provides that we have to monitor that, and to the extent that those sediments start to accumulate, we have to take action to get back after it. So it doesn't come easily. First, that the dissolved standard is pretty darn protective of the fish. The total recoverable standard serves a useful purpose, but in the context of skinny little Silver Bow Creek at 10 CFS, It's literally impossible to achieve, but in return for a willingness to grant that, the regulatory agencies are saying you got to do this monitoring, and if anything comes up a cropper because we're not meeting the total recoverable standard, we have to take additional action. So it comes with a price, and it is all about protectiveness in the stream. Now, I don't mean to avoid your question about, does anybody also think of any other cities that get the waiver? Go ahead.
Nakia.
I just wanted to add to John's answer to the question. If you look in the Surface Water Management Plan, it's actually under Attachment A, Appendix D. No, that ain't even right. I've looked at them so many times, but it's a surface water management plan. It really is unprecedented. There is nobody in the world that we could find that actually, thank you, Attachment A, Exhibit 1, that has a sediment criteria. So we developed a sediment criteria, like John was saying, that nobody else in the world has ever developed. So I just want to point that out. That's kind of another first here in Butte, in my opinion. And you know, the parties, especially the state, pushed for that just because of that. You know, they were letting the reins go a little bit on their total recoverable. So they wanted more, and that's what we consented to. The other piece of that is, I'm not sure you guys are aware, but when John brought up the Buffalo Gulch Basin and the Diggings East Basin, those are the two biggest basins. And really, those are the two, when we modeled it, because we have monitoring all over this city in these drainages, when we modeled it, those are the two biggest loaders, right, of copper and zinc. But they're also the largest basins. So you guys know the weather here in Butte, and they're based off of a 10-year. So we're anticipating that those two largest basins, which are the largest loaders, will only be potentially overtopped every 10 years. So we're talking about, John talked about those initial flushes. We're talking about the smaller storms. So we're gonna keep those smaller storms, let it settle out, treating it, and then slowly discharge it. So I just wanted to point that out about those storm events and how it relates to the waiver.
Commissioner McDonough, follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. This will be my final one. The reason I asked the question earlier was I was told that other municipalities in Montana have applied to the Montana DEQ for waivers for stormwater incidents, and we seem to have a discussion here locally that we're really trying to step out of the bounds and do something that isn't protective of human health or as much as other municipalities in the state, where Billings and Missoula and Bozeman have stormwater collection issues as well, and they have much larger streams or rivers to dump to. So, I mean, that was, I guess, the reason for my question, that we're not really doing anything here in Butte-Silver Bow that other municipalities that are much larger than us are currently trying to do the same thing with the Department of Environmental Quality, with obviously a much less challenge than Butte-Silver Bow with 150 years of mining activity. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Commissioner Mankins.
Thank you, Chief. I guess it would be to Mr. Sesso. So, Mr. Sesso, in your presentation tonight, and thank you for your presentation tonight, I just want to know a little bit more about the repository. You stated that the EPA and the state of Montana are responsible for which repository is going to be used. Is this correct?
Yes.
Yes. So with that, I don't know if this one's for you or Mr. Green. what are the criteria going to be used to decide what criteria are going to be used to decide where this is going to go, on what repository is going to be used?
Nakia.
Thank you. Am I answering all the questions here? Thank you, Commissioner Mankins. So yeah, there will be criteria. And as Betsy said and others said tonight, we're going to be looking and evaluating other areas, right? Safety is a big issue. The geology, where it's located. Many things will be involved in the evaluation of siting a repository. You guys might be familiar with a 1992 siting repository study that was done by Butte-Silver and Atlantic Richfield. I envision that at this point in the process, we are going to have a robust community process that includes the community to help us make those decisions.
Follow-up, Commissioner Mankins.
Robust? Can you just emphasize on robust?
Sure. I think that it'll involve the community of Butte, and we will, as we figure out what other potential sites are potential, right? You gotta pick some locations and actually evaluate them a little bit to see if they're even worth screening. Then we go through a process with the community, with the stakeholders, to determine if that's the right site, the safe site, the right site for this community.
I mean, I could continue on. But I think that just to make it clear on what, make it clear to the public a little more. So you're saying that it's safety and the public their input will be heard when we're deciding on these repositories?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner O'Neill.
Thank you, Chief Executive. I'm following back up on Nikita. Sorry to keep answering you. You're doing a great job, so we'll just keep hammering you as much as we can. Follow up on that. So all the work that was done in this plan and everything, so we still truly, how can I be comfortable signing this, especially if we were agreeing to this tonight, when we truly, in my eyes, as of right now, don't have a clue where we're going to put this stuff. That's still not we don't know. I mean, we can say that put it wherever it's going to be great and everybody's going to be happy. We know that's not true. So if we don't know where we're going to put it, then how do we even move forward at this point?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Commissioner O'Neill. Just one point of clarification. I don't believe you guys are deciding on it tonight. And to that point, last Tuesday night's meeting, I was there, and there was a lot of passion, and as the project manager and developing a lot of this CD, I just want to apologize on behalf of EPA that we did not communicate directly to the local community at Timber Butte the way we should have. And take accountability for that. But what I can say is that through this process, the council not voting tonight, and however long it takes the council to work with their constituents, EPA and other parties are here to work with your constituents and start to discuss this process, how this process looks, and what's best for Butte in the community here. So So I think that we'll have a process, and I think that because we involve the community and take that input into consideration and we work together to find that solution, I think that's the best process moving forward to find the right repository. And that could be an existing repository or a new repository. None of those decisions have been made. And so I think we got a lot of work to do. We heard you loud and clear, and we're going to work with you to make those decisions.
Commissioner Olson.
Thank you, Chief Executive. I think this kind of brings up one of the points that we as commissioners need to work on, is that repositories seem to be an important issue, and how they're cited and what the different risks are during their creation and future into perpetuity as to how safe they are for the citizens and how to cite them. That might be a very good place that we could start with an educational meeting. I think that's one of the things that is missing here, is we have a lot of education to talk about what sort of decisions or what sort of input goes into those decisions and how they'll end up. I think that's a good topic, possible topic, or during some of our educational sessions ongoing before we vote on the CD. I also have a question concerning the waivers again. I think one of the things that I understand, we're talking about waiving the total recoverable down to a dissolved standard. Is it not true that the Clark Fork River from at least Warm Springs to Missoula already has that waiver in place? And it's not only during storm events, it's on a day-to-day basis. And there's a lot of volume, a great deal of volume that goes into the Clark Fork. Would someone like to address that? Thank you.
Patrick.
I will start, and I'm looking back to my colleagues at DEQ. If there's any need for a correction, please do jump in. Yeah, my understanding is that the standard is in place. Currently, state of Montana surface water quality standards are being met for all contaminants of concern during normal flow conditions here. That's a point I think we want to make, is that during normal flow, all the contaminants of concern, aluminum, arsenic, cadmium, copper, lead, mercury, silver, zinc, all of those state standards are being met during normal flow conditions. Where we run into an issue is around copper and zinc during these wet weather storm events. And as Nakia pointed out earlier, the challenge that EPA looked into is when they looked at a variety of different modeling scenarios, really under any scenario, no matter what we did out there on the landscape, we were still going to see those exceedances around those two contaminants of concern, copper and zinc. So that is the basis for this, that initial waiver. The potential for other waivers is really around the fact that after EPA looked at the various remedial components and did their modeling, there was some uncertainty, right? And to address the fact that there's some uncertainty, there's a potential for a waiver to be issued if there's monitoring that shows that there's an exceedance occurring more than once in 3 years, that was not due to a malfunction of the remedy, or that we couldn't correct that through some other additional remedial actions. And that's where that consultation and coordination between EPA and the state becomes really critical. So we look to all of those other efforts to address the issue when it does occur based on monitoring, and then we would consider whether or not a waiver to the federal standard is appropriate in that instance.
Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Chief Executive Palmer. One more, and then I'm going to let these people in the audience speak their piece. It's my understanding that as Council of Commissioners, we cannot amend the consent decree. Is that correct?
the facts are is in this stage of the process, the governing body has to decide whether we should sign it and whether the other parties will sign it. And then when it goes to the court and the Department of Justice and we start this 30-day comment period, then the issues can be considered by the court on whether or not they're willing to sign the consent decree and make it law, if you will. And so for now, our job is to ask questions, but we don't have the authority to change it. It would require going back to the drawing board and get all the parties to agree to any change.
Commissioner Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I want to thank everyone out in the audience. We have a lot of eyes on us, and this is my 14th year being a commissioner for Uptown Butte. I live just up the street, and it's exciting. There's a lot to be excited about. There's a lot of questions. I plan on having a meeting, even though I'm up top of the hill here. You know, we had our own issues when the remediation was done up here, and a lot of impact on neighborhoods, and we're all in this together. Even though I'm up here and a lot of things are happening further down the flat, we all have friends, neighbors, relatives, people that we know that are involved in what's going to be happening here. And we need to look at this in a positive way. There's a lot of little questions, mysteries, concerns. I think it's a great project myself. But I do think that communication is huge. And there's nothing worse than hearing about something after it's happened. I have it happen to me. I get calls and people say, why didn't you know this? Well, you know, I'm not a mind reader. I never did very good in mind reading in third grade when they gave it as a class. And, you know, we do need to hear from people. I'm just so encouraged to see so many faces that get a lot of calls. I'm sure everybody else has. We really covet input. It's imperative for us 12 up here to make these decisions without having people tell us how they feel is really daunting. So thank you all for being here. Communication, I want to hear from people, good, bad, and indifferent. It doesn't matter to me. I just want to know that I have folks that are interested enough to ask questions. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you very much, Chief Executive. Thank you, everyone here in the audience. I really appreciate your time being here and listening to this. Thank you for the presentation and everything. I have a lot of issues with a lot of the document. I have quite a few concerns about it that have been brought up to me by numerous constituents of mine, and I've met with a lot of other ones who have supported the document. Some actually even surprised me with their support. I wasn't expecting it as much, and others have kind of held more true to where I thought there would be. A few of the things I have a problem with about this is that we've been given this a few weeks ago. Commissioner Fisher very sagely made a recommendation that we have council review this document, and I supported that 100%, basically because I felt that the time frame being put before the commissioners was rather unrealistic. We got an email when this came out a while ago that had a vote scheduled for March 18th. And I don't know if that timeline will hold true or not. But I hope it doesn't, because as I've said, I've been meeting with people and I've been trying to understand this document. Working a full-time job and then going out to the community, meeting people, coming to meetings and everything, it doesn't give a lot of us an awful lot of time to fully digest this. And to make that point perfectly clear, that it doesn't really give us enough time to digest it, we've had, and I don't mean to throw you on the fire, and I'm not criticizing you at all because I don't understand it either, ma'am, but we had the vice president of Atlantic Richfield. This affects all of us very much in this community. The one group of people I would say this might affect a little bit more than us is Atlantic Richfield, because they're forking out millions and millions of dollars on this cleanup and the investment in this cleanup. And for their vice president to come up here and say that she's been working on this for 4.5 years and it took her a year to get up to speed, now they want to give us 5 weeks. That's 1/10 of a year, not even, and they want a decision on this. And I'm sure that's not everybody, but that was the timeline put before us. I'm using that as a guideline. So I'm sure there's a lot of us who do not have the expertise in a lot of this matter sitting up here. I'm very grateful for some of the college courses I took at Montana Tech. Go Ore Diggers. That being said, this process has been done in the dark for the most part in this community for the past 30 years. And I'm going to use this 30-year benchmark for a secondary question, but this is the first one. The community has gotten little trickles of information and back and forth, whether it be on the creek or different amendments to the record of decision lately. So there has been some back and forth, and I can see some sections where that has been listened to, but I've also seen through past things in my 10 years on the council where there's these listening sessions. And I love listening sessions, but the one problem I always have with listening sessions is that they're usually like this at the end of the period. So we're going to vote on this, it's going to go before the judge, and we're going to have a listening session. What assurances can we have that these voices and concerns of the people in our community are going to be heard? It sounds like this is a done deal. We're either going to vote yes and take probably the best option. One of the gentlemen I met with, a constituent of mine this weekend, pointed out some different lawsuits that I've been researching. Well, I've had my brother researching for me, which is wonderful of him. But more to the point, we can take this, which I find to be kind of a flawed document and a flawed process, or we can settle for something drastically less, it looks like. So this is probably the best case scenario. And I hate to say this because there has been no public involvement in this scenario. So with that stated, I guess my first question, I'll have a couple follow-ups after this, so won't be so long-winded with them. But what kind of assurance can any of you give the citizens and the people who this body represents that their voices will be heard or have been heard?
Mr. Chief Executive, Commissioner Anderson, first of all, we stand ready to answer any questions that you have. I have not heard from you in these last 3 weeks, so I'm ready, and so is anybody who is more knowledgeable than I, to one by one, however you would like to do it. We're ready to answer your questions. Second, I would say on the record that the citizens of Butte have been heard. I have been in this process for the entire 30 years. We have had several actions that have taken place. Every one of them has come before this Council of Commissioners for concurrence, where we've had public meetings. And I would say over these 30 years, the participation of this community in all of the decisions that have been made has been really good. I think we're proud of the fact that we have engaged our public throughout the process. Now, that is not to say that people have paid any attention to a lot of the work that's been done. This is just work. Everybody has their life to go through, and we do our best to engage the public. We're bad at it, in terms of the government saying, "Hey, there's going to be a public meeting. Come and listen to us talk." Not a lot of people show up, but I can assure you that at every meeting, your staff at Butte-Silver Bow and all of the staff, the technical staff and the legal staff and the executive staff, have been at these meetings, and we're plugging away to make sure the best interests of this community are being heard, and for the most part, I believe they are. The process in the last 3-4 years has been confidential negotiations. We have been in the room. At first, on behalf of the council, chief executive when he was a commissioner, and now Commissioner Olson has been in the room. We have had your participation. I have been available to any of you to answer any questions that you have. And so the process has been participatory in the sense that you have had your representatives at the table, and we have plugged away in the best interests of all of our citizens and every citizen in your district, which I am one. The assurance you asked for is in the body of work that we've put in front of you. We've listened in these last 3 weeks. Obviously, there's a big issue with this, where we're going to put the waste. The consent decree is very clear. We are obligated to find the safest and best place to put it. I think we're reasonably sure that if we try to put it on Timber Butte, there's going to be trouble. All right? And there's going to be a community acceptance issue that we may not be able to get past, and we got to go to Plan B. But we're not going to go backwards and not take the tailings out of the ground. Our priority has been the water resource, to protect the water resource. Way more citizens in this community have said, protect the resource, get those tailings out of the ground, and find a safe place to put it. With respect to the issues we've discussed, I think, very well tonight on the standards we're going to use to measure performance, I think we have done a good deed to get everybody involved. I turn your attention to the responsiveness summary, which is an attachment to the Record of Decision Amendment, and the first several pages, which we chronicle out all of the public spots in the process where we have engaged the public. And I can't remember the number, but there are over 30, I'm pretty sure, where if you look at that responsiveness summary, where we specifically chronicled where we have engaged the public. Now, this process is not perfect, and I don't mean to say that we are going to make everybody happy in this decree, but there's something in there that everybody likes, and everybody individually and as groups in this community have asked us to advocate for, and is in there. If we haven't got to the 10th degree, as was brought up with respect to all the work we're trying to accomplish with this land use and Silver Bow Creek, we've got challenges. We've got a feasibility study. We're working on the challenges in that feasibility study. No one is giving up on that first section of Silver Bow Creek. We believe if we all pull in the same direction, we can get that done too. So I cannot stand in front of you and give you any assurance we're going to listen to you any more than we already have. But I can stand and attest that the public input that we've received over the course of these many years has been incorporated into this document. We do not go to work every day and say we're ignoring the public as we try to represent them in these negotiations and now in this document. So we're doing our level best to gather and incorporate the public's input into the product that we've put in front of you. I can only say that going forward, there is a lot of work left to do. We got to find a repository that passes muster with the science of the criteria and passes muster with the community and where we're going to put it. On the implementation of these projects that we outlined tonight, there is going to be one challenge after another. And it's going to be our role to find solutions to those challenges, to implement this project as it's been outlined, and then measure it, monitor performance, and make sure it stays that way. So there's no assurance I can give you other than the fact that a lot of public input has been made, and that's incorporated into the document in front of you.
Follow up.
Nakia, did you want to add something to that answer?
Yes, please. Thank you. Commissioner Anderson, thank you for the comments. I just wanted to add a very important part because February 13th, man, big weight lifted off the shoulders. I can come out here and talk about, the consent decree. What a feeling that is. But then I thought about when did we really roll out this thing? We worked hard to get an agreement in principle back in May of 2018. And if you look at those concepts, and you see all the 9 work plans, and you see the compliance determination plan, and you see the fact sheet and the TI waiver fact sheet. We all worked hard to get that out in front of the public. And if you go back and look at the May 18th versus what is here now, right, there's some clarifying language, of course, but you're going to see that there's not much difference whatsoever. So I'd like to just say that this, as much as we could went out to the community as fast as it could through the process we were involved with.
Follow up, Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you very much. This one kind of goes towards the EPA mission a little bit. During the Clinton administration, so going back to when a lot of this started, even long before a lot of our time, anybody's on this body's time, one of the key components that the president implemented at that time was environmental justice for communities ravaged by exactly what we're dealing with these pollution and environmental issues. It's something. There's some communities. There's some neighborhoods in this communities. Timber Beat would be one of them. And it's one thing I really like about this proposal is a new RMAP area. When this came into being, the metals abatement program was small. It got a little bit bigger, and now it encompasses pretty much the whole area, which is very good, and I commend you for doing that. So that being said, what other initiatives am I possibly missing in this document that goes with that mission of environmental justice that's going to help the poor aspects and portions of this community that have really suffered the most due to the damage done over the years with this?
Nakia.
Thank you, Nakia.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. It's a great question. And, when I first came on board, a man by the name of Dr. Ray has always championed this. And so I've been hearing a lot about it for 10 years. And, the thing about it is that EPA does need to do a better job. We need to do a better job working with the public to develop information about our programs, like the Residential Metals Abatement Program. We need to work with local communities that also focus on environmental justice. Now, when you talk about the RMAP and the expanded RMAP program, inside Butte priority soils, right? Inside Butte priority soils, Butte-Silver and Atlantic Richfield are required to remediate every single property in Butte priority soils. So we're not biased on, the middle class versus the low. Every single property will be remediated. Every single property has handouts that the RMAP does. So there's a lot that happens there. Not to mention the way that we collect data under the medical monitoring program through the WIC program, which is free of charge for pregnant mothers and children. I think we go $500 to $700 a year. So there's a lot of pieces of that, and there's a lot that we could do better, and we're gonna work on that with the community.
Follow up, Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you very much, Nikki. I really appreciate that. In this, I imagine, is just, I was reading in the paper the other day, there was some rather stringent, I don't want to say rather stringent, but it kind of, I don't know a better way to put it right now. I think all of our brains are tired. But how this program was run in Anaconda, Deer Lodge counties recently, and those regulations have been, a lot more money has been pumped into that program. So there was some complaints that this yard wasn't cleaned up because it didn't meet the proper threshold. Are we going to have similar thresholds to that, or is that something that's been eliminated across the board?
Nakia?
Thank you for the follow-up, Commissioner Anderson. No, we have action levels, and we're going to abide by those action levels. So I'm not sure what you're referring to in Anaconda, but here in Butte, we've developed site-specific action levels for lead and arsenic and mercury. Early on in the risk assessments, we determined those were the human health risks, and so we modeled it again and determined action levels for human health and commercial and open spaces. So those will not change unless of course, we see different and that they need to be changed.
One quick follow-up.
Commissioner Anderson.
I wish I had the article with me. I was going to bring it. I have it in a different notebook. So I'm kind of going by memory. It was a few weeks ago, and they were talking about different thresholds for hotspots, and they eliminated some of them. I don't know if anybody else remembers that or not, but that's kind of what I was getting at. So I'll ask it at a different time if need be. Thank you.
Joe.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Commissioner Anderson, my name is Joe Vronka. I'm with the Environmental Protection Agency out of Helena.
Thank you.
And I can speak to that a little bit. So what they were talking about, I think what you were talking about was specific to the manner in which the Anaconda site gets cleaned up, the residential program goes there. And the way it used to work is they did some area averaging, and if the area average was below the action level, like it's 250 parts per million for arsenic, then the cleanup wouldn't occur. And what we did recently was do away with the area averaging, so if any 1 yard component exceeds the 250 parts per million for arsenic, then it would get a cleanup. So it eliminated the possibility that you might have certain yard components that maybe exceeded the action level a little bit and others that met the action level a little bit. And so what we're doing away with is that area averaging in Anaconda. So now the difference in Anaconda is Anaconda does not have a multi-pathway cleanup program like Butte does. And that's something that Butte-Silver has been doing an amazing job with, is as Mr. Sesso indicated earlier, dealing with multiple pathways. They deal with non-Superfund pathways as well as Superfund pathways. So, and Anaconda does not have that same program.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sword.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I just got one quick one, and then I'll leave it alone. So I guess this would be for Mr. Sess or whatever. I'm looking at the next step. You know, you're talking about if all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and it does make it to Judge Hayden's courts. Is this something that he could sit on forever, or is there a time frame that we'd be looking at to have this approved?
Mr. Chairman, or Mr. Chief, I'll refer to the counsel for EPA.
Okay, thank you.
Henry.
Thank you, Council. My name is Henry Elson. I'm the site attorney for the Environmental Protection Agency, and I've negotiated other consent decrees in the Clark Fork Basin, so I've had some experience with your question. If the consent decree is signed by the 4 parties, it would be lodged with the Federal District Court, and the U.S. Department of Justice would hold a comment period. After that comment period is over, we'll respond to the comments and provide the comments, the summary of the comments and our responses to the judge. The judge is not under a time frame, any kind of mandated time frame, but our experience with the court is they have acted promptly once those comments and the responses to comments are put before the court. Thank you. You're welcome.
Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Mr. Sesso, you said earlier that you're passing the baton, and thank you. The baton has been accepted by the Council of Commissioners, and I truly trust that this body will do its due diligence in looking through it, making informed decisions, and actually reaching out to the constituents to make sure that everything is being heard. A couple of follow-up things or remarks that I want to say on the schedule of events. Yes, it was projected as a preliminary schedule that we would look at adopting this on March 18th. Again, that was a preliminary approach based on past knowledge. Since then, there's been some public input, which has been great, and that's the intent of it. That sense has been pushed back, as you heard Mr. Sesso say earlier today, that there's not a vote tonight. Regardless what was said in the media or otherwise, there is going to be a vote on this at some point. And when that vote is, we don't really know yet for today. Preliminary, we would like to see something probably in April, as it was indicated before. With that being said, I would encourage the public and the commissioners to not wait until that date is set on the vote to be taken to then start looking at this information. This information is out there now. It's out there in multiple sources. It's out there in different medias. There's been several public comments, meetings moving forward. And now is the time to look at this and really dive deep into it. The other thing that I would ask everybody to do, commissioners and the public, and it's hard to do, is you have to sit back and look at what you personally want out of this. And you have to look at it and say, this is what I want personally, but is it the best that is going to be for the whole city of Butte? Which I know that is difficult to do because we always focus on what we personally want out of something. But that we can't always get what we want individually. And one of the challenges with being a commissioner is that I have to take both sides and figure out what is best for the community. And if anybody out there thinks that it is easy, I would like to have a conversation with them, because it's not. That's why I've always encouraged people that have decided to step up and run for this office, or any office for that matter, because they can see what it's like to actually have to make that decision. It is not easy to do, and we take the challenge and we try to move it forward. So I would just ask that people try to look at that in that light. Try to see what is best for you, what is best for the community as a whole. And then before you make any decisions on what avenue you're going to be at, just make sure you're properly informed and try to do that. With that being said, there's been several meetings regarding this already. You guys have all seen the publications in the paper, and I know that there's been some other things. There's a few commissioners. Commissioner Shea started this, having meetings in her district. And so to get public input from her constituents firsthand, she had a meeting, I believe it was this Monday. And what a great idea, you know, get out there and actually try to reach out to the people that we represent. So since then, Commissioner Mankins has decided that he's going to have a meeting on March 9th. He's the District 9 Commissioner, from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Butte-Silver Emergency Operations Center, the Justice Center. So that meeting will be there. That'll be another opportunity for the District 9 constituents to be there. Myself, I'm going to have one on March 16th at 8 o'clock in the morning at Starbucks. Why did I choose Starbucks? District 3 doesn't have a venue that I would be able to have that in that has coffee and that type of stuff. So that's why that's the closest thing to District 3 that I could get. So there's going to be others. Other commissioners out there may and probably have already started working on a draft plan or a meeting that they will be able to meet with these individuals, which is great. The other thing that's been great is that Butte-Silver staff, from everybody to EPA to Atlantic Richfield, has all accepted that we want meetings, and they all said, if you want us there, tell us where it is and we'll be there. And granted, that's a big commitment on them, and it's good to see that they're willing to go up and meet us. And so, again, there's meetings out there. It's out there. Start reviewing it. Ask the questions. Now is the time. Again, you might not get exactly what you want, but look at the picture as a whole. As John said, Mr. Sesso said, once this body takes action on it, it goes to the judge. The judge holds a 30-day public hearing. People can go through and submit their comments at that point. And if you think that a judge is not going to look at those public comments, you might be crazy, because they're going to look at them and make sure that everything is for the best of the public. And that's what I would encourage everybody to do, is start writing your thoughts, submit those questions to where they need to be, and hopefully Butte-Silver will be an even better place than what it is today moving forward for the future. So, thank you.
And along those lines, I just want to say that this evening's presentation was just a presentation, and the way presentations work before the council is there's a staff report for information to the commissioners. Commissioners ask questions. It's not an open forum for the community at this time. It doesn't get advertised that way, so we'll probably close the presentation here pretty quick. But I'm sure the council is turned over to the council now, and they will probably schedule a question and answer period before this body, along with their neighborhood meetings or any other meeting that they deem necessary, and they can take as long as they want to do that. So having said that, we'll end the presentation. We're going to take about a 10-minute recess before we move on to the rest of the agenda. We're going to call the meeting back to order, please. Okay, calling the meeting back to order. Can we have roll call again, please?
We have 12 present and 0 absent.
Thank you. So, as I had said, this was a public a presentation and not a public comment period. And Commissioner Morgan, as chairman of the council, has agreed to submit a communication that there will be a question and answer period for the general public at a future committee of the whole meeting. But please take the time before then to check out the CD, and it's online. You can access all the CD online or attend some of the meetings in the commission district. And then when you come to the council meeting, that Commissioner Morgan will have that or not a presentation, but an actual question and answer period on the agenda. Everyone should, hopefully will have their questions answered by that time, but if not, we'll try to get them answered then. So having said that, we're going to move into the approval of the minutes of the February 19th, 2020 regular meeting. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. At this time, I'll make a motion that we approve the February 19th, 2020 regular meeting minutes.
Second.
A motion made and seconded to approve the minutes of the February 19th, 2020 meeting. Is there anything on the question? Commissioner Fisher.
Yes, thank you, Chief Executive Palmer. Are we not going to have the public comments on any items on the consent agenda?
I just see that I skipped that. We will get back to that right after we approve the minutes.
I disagree with that. Thank you.
Okay. What's that? Yeah, I'm still allowed. It's right after we approve the minutes, we'll go back.
We're still doing it. You gonna vote?
Do you want me to say something?
What's that?
Do you want me to explain process?
Yeah, let's vote on the minutes and then. Anyone wishing to change their vote? Will the clerk please record the vote?
12 yea and 0 nay.
Motion carries. Now we'll go back to the public comment on any items on the consent agenda. So this comment period is for any item, to make a public comment on any item on the consent agenda this evening. County Attorney Joyce, do you have something?
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I just wanted to maybe clarify for the members of the public what the process is. And, there are open meeting laws, and so as part of that, we do prepare an agenda and to let the public know what the council is going to be talking about. And on tonight's agenda, this was listed as a presentation. And for a presentation, the point of a presentation is, to listen to whoever's giving the presentation. And it isn't typically an event on the agenda where people are allowed to comment. The reason that you have public comment on matters on a consent agenda is because consent agenda items are items that the council has actual action to take on. So there's a recommendation that's made, and so when they vote on that consent agenda, whatever recommendations are made are adopted by the full council if none of the council members segregate out an item to specifically talk about. So the reason that they allow public comment on those is because prior to them voting on those items that they're actually taking action on, the public has an opportunity to say something so the council members can take that into consideration in making their vote. Tonight's presentation, as was indicated several times, there's not going to be a vote on this, and there is going to be an opportunity for the public to continue to participate, because there are also laws out there on public participation, and it's very important to this council and to this local government that we follow those laws too. And whenever there's a matter that's of significant public interest, we want to ensure that there's an opportunity for public participation. And so that is why the council is considering having these individual meetings in their districts, and also why they are intending to have a specific meeting that will allow the public to be the ones to come forward and have questions and answers to specific questions that the public has about the content of the consent agenda. So I'm sure that people may be frustrated tonight that they thought they might be able to comment on what was said tonight, but what I'm saying is that there will be an opportunity for all of the members of the public to do that. It's just that we do have to follow, the rules of running a legislative meeting. And what was put on the agenda for tonight was a presentation. And so that's why Chief Executive Palmer is indicating that there won't be comments tonight on the presentation. There will be an opportunity for the public to do that at a later date. And the items that you can comment on tonight are the matters that are listed under the consent agenda, which are items that they will actually take action upon tonight. So I hope that helps.
Commissioner Mankins.
So, Mrs. Joyce, is that also saying so that if anybody wanted to do a public comment on any public matter not on the agenda, seeing that that is not on the agenda and it's a presentation, so they could wait to the end of this and actually speak?
Mr. Chief Executive, Commissioner Mankins, so it is on the agenda. I'm not sure that you're saying that part of the agenda that says public comment for items not on the agenda is a statutory requirement that at every public meeting of any board or commission, you have to put that on the agenda so that it allows members of the public to speak on an item that, even though it's not on the agenda, it might be something that came up to them that's of significant interest to them that they want to bring to the council's attention or to any board's attention. But this matter is on the agenda. There was a presentation on the agenda, so that would not apply to an item not on the agenda.
It's not on the consent agenda, is that what you're saying?
So we can only talk to one person at a time? We can only talk to our own? No. Mr. Chief Executive.
County Attorney.
No, and if I wasn't clear, what I said is that the commissioners themselves may be deciding to have their own meetings that you can attend, and you can go to any of those meetings. They're going to be, publicly advertised. But yes, you can. But what the chief executive said, and what I tried to reiterate, is that there's going to be a new communication for a subsequent meeting of this council that is going to allow the public, it's going to be on the agenda for the public to come back and ask questions of the whole council on on the consent agenda.
Mr. Banderup.
R. Banderup, 2601 Grand Avenue, President of the Greeley Neighborhood Community Development Corporation. Reference Section 1, Consent Agenda. B, Communications. Number 16, Communication number 2020-110, Greeley Neighborhood Community Development Corporation, Inc., requesting Council Commissioners submit a request to the that the Butte Priority Soils Operative Unit consent decree be amended to include an airborne hazardous to human health, heavy metals monitoring and control program. I want to thank you, Mr. Cecil, for clarifying that the consent decree cannot be amended at this point. That is why our good chair recommended that it be noted and filed. But I still have the privilege of making comments relative to that. During the whole presentation this evening, the word dust was not used. The word dust was presented at the rod and was attached to this council's request for amendments to the CD. The part relative to health studies was included in the CD as one of the actions. As I have said previously, we don't give a D about the fish, and we don't give a D about the crick, but we did well care about the health of the humans. We're glad that you are willing to admit by your actions that you are more concerned about the health of the fish and meeting the standards than you are about the health of the humans in our community, as you seem to prefer to sweep this dust issue under the carpet and not include dust monitoring in the scope of the CD. We are concerned about what seems to be the attitude that the CD, when it is signed and the Superfund cleanup is done, then the greater Butte-Silver Bowl area will no longer have the stigma of a Superfund site, and we can quit worrying about trying to minimize human exposure to the hazards to human health, heavy metals, contaminants present in our community. We would think that you would realize that the Butte-Silver Bowl area is an active mining camp that is well known for being the richest heavy metals natural ore lode in the world, has 150 years of historic mine waste deposits, all of which are not in the Butte-Silver Bowl or in the Butte Public Priority Soils Operative Unit Superfund site, and from its active mining operation. I understand that the CD is, and my request only refers to the operative unit. Even the EPA project manager recognizes that this is a heavy, highly mineralized area. We now have several independent dust sample analyses that indicate that there is hazardous to human health heavy metal contaminants in the airborne dust. And 5 independent studies that indicate that people are ingesting, inhaling, and accumulating these metals in their bodies and or are dying at a rate from diseases associated with heavy metal exposure in the greater Butte-Silver Bowl community, not just in the Butte Priority Soils Operative Unit Superfund site, than they are in all other counties in Montana and or the other compared locations in these studies. It is not only that the amount of dust is a nuisance, it is what is in the dust that is hazardous to human health that we are concerned about. We understand that dust monitoring and control is not now a part of the scope of this consent decree. But how can the EPA's Regional 8 Superfund chief say the decree specifies how all that work will be implemented, monitored, and evaluated to make sure that the results of the work are protective of human health and the environment if there is not even any airborne dust monitoring being done? Just how stupid do you feel people are?
Any other public comment on any items on the consent agenda?
Mr. Chief Executive, members of the Council, County Attorney Joyce, my name is Brad Newman. I'm a resident of Butte and a taxpayer and a voter. It's all my legal status anymore. Because we have all these people here, I just want to clarify the ruling from the chair. I think I understand it. There's going to be a public meeting of the Committee of the Whole. It will be a meeting of record. Because obviously these individual meetings that commissioners are having are not matters of record. And I want to make sure everybody here who knows that they wanted to come, and I think they were under the understanding that they could speak their piece or answer questions from their commissioners. I would at least encourage you, schedule that meeting as soon as you're allowed to do so under the open meeting statutes, because you are at the outset of your consideration, and as Commissioner Morgan noted, you don't want to do this on the last day. There's a lot of misinformation out there, I believe, and so I think you want to put on the record the concerns of your constituents and still have time to process those before you make your decision.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, my name is Bob Brock, 2912 State Street. I'm going to be speaking on communication number 6 on the consent agenda, which is this body's authorization of the Human Resources Director to sign a collective bargaining agreement with the International Union of Operating Engineers. Before I make my comment, I want to be crystal clear. I'm not making this statement in my capacity as an international representative with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. I have quite a bit of negotiating experience when it comes to getting to the stage of collective bargaining agreements like the one that's in front of you at number 6. And my experience has been that it's not uncommon for a body such as this to send an agreement back at a point of tentative agreement, to send an agreement back to the parties and get back to the table and iron out ambiguous language at this juncture. And I'm sure this council has done that in the past with matters pertaining to collective bargaining. And I think it'd be wise of this council to make sure that that's an option that might be available for certain other negotiations that we heard a lot about tonight. Thank you.
Any other public comment on any items on the consent agenda?
Hello, I am Steve Jackshaw. I reside at 3251 South Montana on Timber Butte. And I would like to talk about Communication 16, number 2020-110, dust monitoring. I am all in favor of this. As you know, I mentioned I live on Timber Butte. So this could be very handy for us since you plan on putting dirt next to Copper Mountain Park. And I don't know if you forgot, but there's little guy football that goes on there from August till October. Every single weekend there are games there with all these little kids. They practice there. Baseball and softball all summer long. And now we're going to suscept them to dust storms of contaminated soil. It only makes sense that we monitor the dust. And I look forward to meeting with you again to discuss the repository. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other public comment on any items on the consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Chief Executive's report. And on this one, I'm going to call on Karen Sullivan, the Director of the Health Department, to just give a quick update on the coronavirus. Karen.
Good evening. For the record, I'm Karen Sullivan, Health Officer, and I wanted to update Council on the status of coronavirus in Butte-Silver. I wanted to let you know that today the Unified Health Command, made up of the City and County of Butte-Silver and its healthcare coalition partners, as well as St. James Healthcare, has formed the United Health Command. We have taken several steps to prepare for the possible spread of the coronavirus, also known as COVID-19, in Butte-Silver County. To date, I want to emphasize that we have no cases of COVID-19 in Montana and Butte-Silver as well. Since January, members of the United Health Command have been on alert monitoring the evolving situation and preparing to take necessary measures to curb the spread of the disease, activating the Unified Health Command, and proactively working with the Montana State Department of Public Health and Human Services are some of the measures that are being taken. We take our information from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, otherwise known as the CDC. We get our information from the Montana Department of Public Health and Human Services, and then we in turn distribute that information to our community. As of March 4th, 2020, there were more than 90,000 cases of COVID-19 worldwide, including more than 3,000 fatalities. According to the CDC, as of midday, there are close to 150 cases in the U.S., and as of midday, there have been 11 deaths in our country. In the state of Montana, 26 returning travelers from China have been monitored since February 1, and 19 have successfully completed the 14-day monitoring period. 7 individuals are currently being monitored in Montana. None of those individuals who are being monitored are located in Butte-Silver. Cases of COVID-19 have ranged from people with little to no symptoms to severe illness and death. The CDC expects cases to continue to be confirmed, and the Unified Health Command wants families and individuals to prepare to take action to help prevent the spread of virus. In that vein, we are trying to talk to the public as much as we can, including in this forum. To date, the Unified Health Command has activated a Unified Health Command structure, and members will meet regularly or as often as needed. We met today. We have interacted with the State Health Department and the State's Department of Emergency Services to establish response relationships. We have begun monitoring and conserving healthcare facility supplies of personal protective equipment, including masks and gloves. We plan to establish a joint information center that will provide information and respond to news media requests. We have established a public health hotline for Butte-Silver County at 497-5008, and we are working to maintain calm and to discourage rumors and misinformation. The Unified Health Command is comprised of the Butte-Silver Health Department, the Office of Emergency Management from Butte-Silver and St. James Healthcare. Those are the lead agencies. Other agencies are involved, including the Butte School District, Montana Tech, Southwest Montana Community Health Center, Butte-Silver Law Enforcement Division, Butte-Silver Fire Department, A1 Ambulance, and the Red Cross. I want to introduce in the back. in the back, Karen Malakny. Karen, could you stand? This is Karen Malakny, our public health nurse, and she is our lead at the health department right now. She's my boss, and what she directs us to do, we are her soldiers in what's occurring. So I want you to know, with Karen's leadership, we are in very good hands. The U.S. House today approved $8.3 billion in emergency coronavirus aid, and swift approval is expected from the Senate and President Trump. As you might expect, this could cost counties money. If you imagine the county of Butte-Silver having to quarantine and isolate people, that's on our dime. And so we are interested in receiving federal funding to assist in this effort. The reality is, for that funding to trickle down will take a while. So I wanted to put the county on notice that this is scary for local jurisdictions. I know that in Gallatin County and Park County, they are worried about tourists in Yellowstone Park and people traveling through Gallatin Airport, which is Montana's #1 airport in regard to traffic. And we are all planning. I mean, how do you isolate and quarantine 30 people on an airplane? It costs money. King County this week bought a hotel. They bought a hotel. So they are doing massive planning out in Washington State. So in the end, as the Unified Health Command, we're very prepared. Our main job is to maintain calm and dispel rumors, and I think we're doing an adequate job of that. I'll try to keep Dave and the commissioners apprised by email, as the situation is very fluid and changes really by the hour. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Next, we'll move into the consent agenda. A 1 through 4 and B 1 through 21. Commissioner, are there any segregations or friendly amendments? Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I'd like to segregate number 10, 2020-104, and number 14, 2020-108.
Okay.
Second.
Any furthers? Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Chief Executive Palmer. I would like to segregate number 19, 2020-114.
Any further? Seeing none. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. At this time, I'd like to make a motion that we approve Section 1, the consent agenda, A, the committee reports 1 through 4, B, communications 1 through 21, with the exclusion of number 10, 2020-104, number 14, 2020-108, and number 19, 2020-114.
Second.
We have a motion made and seconded to approve the consent agenda A 1 through 4 and B 1 through 21, exclusive of number 10, 14, and 19. Is there anything on the question? Will everyone please vote? Anyone wishing to change their vote? Will clerk please record the vote?
11 yea and 1 nay.
Motion carries. Next, we'll go into communication B10. I think it's 10. Communication number 2020-104. Dan Olson, District Number 5, Commissioner, Butte-Silver Economic Development Chair, requesting Council of Commissioners and the Economic Development Committee met on February 18th and February 20th, 2020, to hear presentations by applicants requesting the economic mill levy funds. This committee will be meeting on March 11th, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. to finalize the award for each funds. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. My original suggestion for this was to hold it in abeyance pending the March 11th, 2020, but in order to do that in the Economic Development Committee, I need to refer it to the Economic Development Committee to have a special agenda drafted on it. So at this time, I would make a motion that we refer communication 2020-104 to the Economic Development Committee to hold a meeting on March 11th at 5:30.
Second.
We have a motion made and seconded to refer communication 2020-104 to the Economic Development Committee of the Council and hold this in advance. Is there anything on the question? Will everyone please vote? Anyone wishing to vote or change their vote? Will the clerk please record the vote?
12 yea and 0 nay.
Motion carries. Next, we will go to communication number 19. Communication 2020-114. Kristen Rosett.
No.
Pardon me?
14.
Oh, we skipped 14? Trying to get out of here. Communication 14. 2020-108, Jim Keenan, Chief Water Operator, requesting Council of Commissioners authorize the Chief Executive to sign the Professional Services Agreement proposal between Aqua Aerobic Services, Inc. and Butte-Silver for programming updates to the Clean in Place CIP system for the ceramic membrane system at the Basin Creek Water Treatment Plant. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. The only reason that I segregated this communication is it was brought forward to me that we don't want to take action on this particular object, so they don't want this body to take a vote on it. They want to pull it from the agenda, but being that the agenda was already published and it was given a communication, I just have to make a motion that we note communication 2020-108 and place it on file. Mr. Keenan is here if he needs to say anything, but that was nope. All right, that's where we're at. So a motion to note 2020-108 and place on file.
Second.
We have a motion made and seconded to note communication 2020-108 and place it on file. Is there anything on the question? Will everyone please vote? Anyone wishing to change their vote? Will the clerk please record the vote?
12 yea and 0 nay.
Motion carries. Now we will go to number 19, communication 2020-114. Kristen Rosa, Tiffin Administrator, requesting Council of Commissioners authorize the Chief Executive to sign a lease agreement with purchase requirement with Warehouse Distribution of Butte for a 27.45 section of property, acre section of property. Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Chief Executive Palmer. I segregated this communication. I would like to know a little bit more about what's going on. I read the letter that's requesting the Council of Commissioners sign a lot of the lease. The reason I'm bringing this up is there's been some talk around town that the name of the person or developers, whoever's coming here, is out in the public, and we as commissioners have no idea what's going on. So I just thought it would be wise to find out a little bit more about what's going on and if there's something we should know prior to this. Thank you.
Kristen.
Commissioner Fisher, council members, Chief Executive. Warehouse Distribution in Butte is a name of the company. They wanted to stay quiet for about 2 more weeks. They have a lot of PR that they need to do to talk to employees and to talk to customers. So they were requesting to stay a little bit under the radar. Why we push this communication at this time is they also need to order a very, very expensive building. And they did not feel comfortable ordering this building without knowing that they have the land under their control. So it's a very exciting prospect. We fully planned in a couple weeks to be able to tell you exactly who it was, but at this time, they are requesting that they stay anonymous. I don't know how long that's going to last, but I do feel that I can't tell you who it is at this point.
Commissioner Fisher.
thank you. Fully understand, Krista. And I just kind of feel that it's more of a comment than anything. That we as commissioners sometimes, we go into these agreements and got an agreement to sell 27.5 acres for $2,000 per acre, and some people in town know more than we do, and it's kind of a disappointing factor to me that somebody's leaking something, whether it's in the Tiffin or whatever, but we're not hearing about it. And I really have no problem with it, and I can understand their point of not wanting to, disclose theirs, and I can understand your point not wanting to disclose it. So I appreciate you coming and answering my questions. So with that being said, I would make a motion to concur and place on file Communication 2020-114. Thank you, Kristen.
We have a motion made and seconded to concur and place on file Communication 2020-114. Is there anything on the question? Will everyone please vote? Anyone wishing to change their vote? Will the clerk please record the vote?
11 yea and 1 nay.
Motion carries. Next, we'll go to Section 2, Ordinances and Resolutions for final passage. Number 1 is Resolution number 2020-08. Will the clerk please read the title?
Council Resolution number 2020-08, a resolution authorizing and approving the sale of real property formerly known as 430 North Main Street, owned by the City and County of Butte-Silver, State of Montana, described as lots 8 and 8A of the limitation load number 645, located in Section 13, Township 3 North, Range 8 West, parcel number 2009950, to the City and County of Butte-Silver, Montana, to Our Lady of the Rockies Incorporated, in accordance with the provisions of the Butte-Silver Municipal Code and providing for an effective date herein.
Thank you. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. At this time, I move to pass Council Resolution 2020-08, or to place on final reading, having been deemed fully read at length.
Second.
We have a motion made and seconded to pass Council Resolution Council Resolution 2020-08 on final reading. Is there anything on the question? Will everyone please vote? Anyone wishing to change their vote? Will the clerk please record the vote?
12 yea and 0 nay.
Motion carries. Number 2, Council Resolution number 2020-10. Will the clerk please read the title?
Council Resolution number 2020-10, a resolution calling for the election on the continuation of the imposition of one mill levy to be adjusted annually to raise $65,000 for economic development purposes for a 4-year period beginning in the fiscal year 2020 and 2021 and providing for an effective date herein.
Thank you. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. At this time, I move to place Council Resolution 2020-10 on final reading and pass, having been deemed fully read at length.
Second.
We have a motion made and seconded to pass Council Resolution 2020-10 on final reading. Is there anything on the question? Will everyone please vote? Anyone wishing to change their vote? Will the clerk please record the vote?
We have 8 yea and 4 nay.
Motion carries. Section 3, Ordinances and Resolutions, suspension of the rules for final passage. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. At this time, I move for the suspension of the rules for the purpose of passing Council Resolution 2020-11 by waiving subsection 7 of Rule 36 of the Rules and Order of the Council of Commissioners, thereby having it considered for advanced passage without reference to the Judiciary Committee.
Second.
We have a motion made and seconded to suspend the rules to pass Council Resolution 2020-11 on final reading. Is there anything under question? Will everyone please vote? Anyone wishing to change their vote? Will the clerk please record the vote?
12 yea and 0 nay.
Motion carries. Council Resolution number 2020-11. Will the clerk please read the title?
Council Resolution Number 2020-11, a resolution amending the fiscal year 2020 budget during the fiscal year after conducting a public hearing at a regularly scheduled meeting of the Council of Commissioners in accordance with Section 7-6-406 MCA, appropriating general fund reserves to the General Fund Courthouse Improvement Fund for the purpose of renovating the fourth floor of the Butte-Silver Courthouse and providing for an effective date herein.
Thank you. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. I move to place Council Resolution 2020-11 on final reading and passed, having been deemed fully read at length.
Second.
We have a motion made and seconded to pass Council Resolution 2020-11 on final reading. Is there anything on the question? Will everyone please vote? Anyone wishing to change their vote? Will the clerk please record the vote?
11 yea and 1 nay.
Motion carries. Next is the time for public comment on any public matter not on the agenda. Ed.
I know we all want to go home. Auditor Banner of 2601 Grand Avenue. I want to commend the Director of the Health Department for bringing before you an update on what she is doing relative to the coronavirus. The coronavirus is one nasty virus. It is said that an exposed person may be contagious for a week or more before any symptoms appear and the person is aware that they may be spreading the virus. We need to upgrade our risk factor from if it comes to Butte to when it comes from Butte. We need to be doing a little bit more than just keeping the calm. The government of the state of Montana is now taking the coronavirus risk seriously. I hope this government also takes it seriously. We have already lost more than a month of valuable disaster planning, preparing, training, and participating time. I did not hear any inclusion of our search and rescue in the group that the director mentioned. We have our first responders properly trained to deal with an infectious pandemic situation? Or are they going to run into the building like they did in Kirkland, where there's 12 infected people, and end up in 24 days of quarantine? Do our first responders, hospitals, and morgues have the proper hazmat protection gear to deal with the infected? When I look at the pictures coming out of Asia, I see people in full hazmat suits. I do not see them running around in surgical masks and gowns. Maybe we need to take a note and learn a thing or two from the people who have been dealing with this the longest. Have our first responders, healthcare workers, and the people been encouraged to prepare by stocking up and practicing proper infectious pandemic procedures? Have the people, the churches, and the other groups that hold meetings been encouraged to suspend hugs and handshakes and use the Asian greeting? And implement that practice of a 3-foot distance so they are accustomed to this when the virus does arrive? Last week we were told that the hospital said they are prepared. Are they? The estimates are that this virus could hospitalize as many as 1% or more of the population. That would be 300 to 400 people in the Butte-Silver Bowl area, many of which may need to be isolated, all of which will need to be isolated, and many of which may even require intensive care. Is our hospital prepared when it can only handle about a half dozen in isolation or intensive care? Are our morgues prepared to handle the infected dead? In most extreme situation, only about a half of 1% of people died from the flu that were in this infection. At least 3% are dying that have contracted it. That's 7 times more deadly than the flu. As emergency funding for equipment, supplies, first responder and health personnel planning, preparedness, training, and practice so it becomes a custom been dealt with, and the procedure for emergencies such as quarantine and isolation been put into practice so we are prepared and customized when the virus arrives in Butte. She just brought you the first weekly report. I do hope she continues to bring you weekly reports and bring you up to date and provide you with details of what they are doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Is there any other public comment on any item not on the agenda? Seeing none, call your attention to calendar of other meetings and events. And Commissioner Morgan. We have a motion made and seconded to adjourn. Anything on the question? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Just had a question and answer period on Superfund. Yeah. And we'll have. What's that? There's MR does, and whenever they're transporting shit, AR has their policies and shit. They put their shit down, wet it down. And through the CD, there are going to be policies in place for